The street looked like something out of a magazine. Perfectly aligned houses, freshly cut lawns, identical mailboxes, and an eerie kind of order that felt almost too controlled. This was Brookstone Ridge, a quiet suburban neighborhood somewhere in the United States, the kind of place where everything looked perfect, as long as you followed the rules. Margaret Whitmore had lived here for over 25 years. Her late husband, Thomas, had bought the house when their kids were still young. Every corner of that home carried memories, birthdays, barbecues, quiet Sunday mornings. But 2 years ago, everything changed. Thomas passed away after a sudden heart attack. Since then, Margaret had been living alone. She was 70 now, slower, quieter, but still holding on to the only place that made her feel close to him. At first, the neighborhood seemed supportive. Neighbors dropped off casseroles, checked in on her. But the HOA, they saw something else. They saw vulnerability. The first violation notice came just 3 weeks after the funeral. Lawn maintenance noncompliance. Margaret stared at the letter in confusion. Her grass was slightly overgrown. She hadn't had the energy to deal with it. Attached to the notice was a $200 fine. She called the HOA office, her voice soft and polite. "I'm sorry, I've just been dealing with a loss. I'll have it taken care of this week. Is there any way to waive the fine?" The response was cold. "Ma'am, the rules apply to all residents equally." That was the beginning. Over the next 2 years, the notices kept coming. Her mailbox color was inconsistent with community standards. Her trash bin was visible from the street beyond permitted hours. A small crack in her driveway became a safety violation. Even the American flag her husband used to hang was flagged once for improper display condition. Each notice came with fines: $150, $300, $500. They piled up faster than she could keep track. Margaret tried to comply, she really did. But every time she fixed one issue, another appeared. It started to feel less like enforcement and more like targeting. Her savings began to drain. She stopped turning on lights in unused rooms, skipped small comforts, cut back on groceries. But the fines didn't stop. One evening she sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by letters, overdue notices, warnings. Her hands trembled as she opened the latest envelope. Final notice, lien proceedings initiated. Her breath caught. A lien meant they could eventually take her home. The home she built her life in. That night she sat in silence, staring at Thomas's photo. "I don't know how much longer I can fight this." But she wasn't as alone as she thought. Hundreds of miles away, her children were about to step in. Her son, Daniel Whitmore, was a corporate attorney in Chicago. Her daughter, Emily Whitmore, was an investigative journalist based in New York. Margaret hadn't told them the full story. She didn't want to worry them. But when Emily visited unexpectedly, she saw the truth. The unopened mail. The stress in her mother's face. The quiet fear. Within hours, Daniel was on a call. "What do you mean they're placing a lien on the house?" The tone changed immediately. This wasn't just a family issue anymore. It became a case. Daniel started digging into the HOA's bylaws, enforcement history, and financial disclosures. Emily did what she did best. She started asking questions. She reached out to neighbors. At first, people were hesitant. HOAs in the U.S. have power, real power. But slowly, stories began to come out. An elderly veteran fined repeatedly over minor issues. A single mother charged thousands over unauthorized modifications. A pattern started to form. The HOA wasn't just strict. It was selective, targeting people who were less likely to fight back. Then came the breakthrough. Daniel found something buried deep in the HOA's financial records. The HOA president, Richard Collins, owned a contracting company, the same company that had been hired repeatedly for mandatory repairs, cited in violations. Repairs residents were being forced to pay for. It was a closed loop. Create violations, force compliance, profit from the solution. Emily managed to get recordings from a former HOA board member. In one clip, Collins's voice was clear. People like her don't push back, they just pay. That was it. That was everything. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. Margaret had been listed on the agenda. Escalation for enforcement action. But this time, things were different. The meeting room was packed. Margaret sat quietly in the front row. Daniel and Emily sat behind her. Watching. Waiting. Richard Collins stood at the front, confident as ever. Due to repeated noncompliance, the board recommends proceeding with legal enforcement, including lien execution. Actually, Daniel stood up. The room turned. I think we should review something first. A projector flickered on. Financial documents filled the screen. Contracts, payments, internal approvals. Then the recordings played. Collins's voice echoed through the room. The shift was immediate. Whispers turned into murmurs. Murmurs into anger. That happened to me too. They did the same thing to us. The silence that had protected the HOA for years broke in minutes. Collins tried to interrupt. This is being taken out of context. Daniel didn't raise his voice. Then we'll let a court decide the context. Emily added, and the public. By the next morning, the story went live. A full exposé. Local media picked it up. Then national outlets. Authorities launched an investigation. Within weeks, the HOA board was suspended. Collins was under legal scrutiny, and every fine issued under his leadership put under review. Margaret received an official letter. All penalties against your property have been voided. She read it twice, then a third time. Not because she didn't understand it, but because she finally believed it. A few days later, she sat on her porch again. Same chair, same house, but something had changed. This time, her children sat beside her. You didn't just save the house, she said quietly. You gave me peace again. Daniel smiled slightly. It was always yours. The camera pulls back slowly. The same neighborhood, same houses, but no longer silent. Because now people knew what happens when someone finally fights back.